episode of OTTB On Tap. I'm Neve.
And I'm Emily. Hey Neve, what's on tap today?
Today we're sitting down with event rider Caitlin Reamy for another edition of our Underdog Series. Caitlin has an incredible young thoroughbred named Patrone, who she restarted in the fall of 2021, and they've been working their way up the levels over the last 2 years, having just completed a 2-star long. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So let's start at the beginning. And can you tell us a little bit about your background with horses and how you got involved with riding?
Yeah, so when I was 5 or 6, my mom had a coworker whose daughter rode horses, and I had always loved picking out the horse toys and things like that. So my mom asked if I could just take a pony ride. And it turned into weekly lessons, and then we found a lesson barn, and then my mom bought property so that we could have a pasture and a barn, and I got into 4-H, and I actually started riding hunters, and I did the pony hunters and the equitation growing up, and I dabbled in eventing just for fun, and then eventually I was like, this is really cool, and I want to do it professionally.
Awesome. And then did that take you through your college years? Did you go to college, or did you jump right into riding?
Yeah, I went to Virginia Tech and I graduated in 2020, and I was on the eventing team there.
Oh.
It was still growing at the time, and we didn't have a set coach or anything, but it was really cool to have that camaraderie and community of other people my age who just were really passionate about horses and about eventing.
Oh, neat. Yeah, I didn't ride in college. I think that would be a really cool experience. But I did come up through like the 4-H and Pony Club, and we had some of that kind of camaraderie experience, especially with Pony Club. And it's just so helpful when you have other people that are like into the exact same thing and on your team. So what happened next? After you got out of college?
So when I was in college, I spent 3 months between semesters in Ireland working for Richard Shane at Cooley Farm. And I think that's when I really decided. I knew I wanted to do horses, and I was like, this eventing thing is pretty cool. And when I went over there and I spent the time with them, learning from them, that's when I really decided eventing is what I want to do. That's what I'm sticking with. And I did spend one winter in Wellington with a jumper just to say I had done it, but I knew I wanted to go back to eventing. So when I graduated, of course, in the middle of a pandemic, I went home and I rode for people locally to just save some money up. And then in the end of 2020 into like January 1st of 2021 is when I started working for Ryan Wood.
Okay. And tell us what that was like. What was that experience working for Ryan Wood and Woodstock eventing?
It's amazing. I started for Ryan as a working student, and I think we both realized pretty quickly that I have a bit of a personality for managing. And so I transitioned into the role of his head girl, and that's, still what I'm doing now. And it's been so amazing learning from Ryan and getting to travel all over the world and see things and learning both in and out of the saddle, because for me, at least, like doing the hands-on grooming at shows and things like that translates to how I work with my own horse at shows and things like that.
And did you have a horse during this time, or were you solely working for Ryan and riding the horses that he had there?
I came with a little homebred pony that had been bred to do hunters, and he was too much of a nutter. Ryan helped me sell him, and then we started looking for a proper horse for me to get going with. I'm really lucky. I know you hear stories about people ending up in barns where the rider was a yeller or whatever, and Ryan's just like a good person, and he's happy to teach us and give us advice. And when we're struggling in the barn, he chips in. I am definitely really lucky that I ended up here first. And that's how I found El Patrone.
Were you always looking for a thoroughbred, or were you willing to look at other breeds as well?
I knew I was looking for a thoroughbred because when I sold the one horse, I put a lot of that money into my student loans. And I knew you can get a cheap thoroughbred, but it's still a nice horse. And thoroughbreds typically make such good event horses. And Ryan has had a lot of really nice thoroughbreds. And I knew I was in the perfect position to get a horse that I could really do something with.
How involved was Ryan with the process of finding a new horse?
Ryan hated this. I really wanted a chestnut mare. And Ryan was like, why can't you get a nice bay gelding? And I was like, that's too easy. I like to say we compromised on a chestnut gelding, but like at the end of the day, I was looking at anything. If it seemed like it fit the bill and was an athlete, I was like, all right, I'll go look at it.
And did you try a bunch of different horses, or was El Patrone the first one that you looked at?
I'd tried a few in Maryland and a couple in Virginia without really having much luck. I did take one horse on trial and vet it, and it did not pass. Some soft tissue stuff, and Ryan was like, you don't necessarily want to be rehabbing something at this point in your search and career. So the search continued, and I think Ryan had gone over to look at a different horse that June had. And he happened to see Patrick out in a field, and he was like, oh, what's that? And she told him, and he was like, all right, I've got a girl that's looking. I'm going to have her call you tonight. And he did. He was like, you need to call June tonight and go look at this horse. So I did.
Do you know what it was that Ryan saw, or what really made him spark that urgency in you to go find out about this horse?
I think he's just a beautifully built horse. I know I'm biased, but he's built to do a job. And I don't know exactly what it was, if she was lunging him or if he was trotting out in his field, but Ryan was like, this is a flashy horse. This is a nice horse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was just looking at his breeding today. I was like, wait a second. Foxy AG sounds really familiar. That's El Patrone, your horse's dam. But also a mare that I had. She was out of Partner Zero, but out of the same dam. And she was so talented. She was bay, not chestnut, but super mover, super jumper, little quirky. Didn't know what Velcro was or a hose in the wash rack, even though she'd raced 50-something times. But just such an absolute athlete, for sure. So I was like, ooh, that's really exciting. I forgot that they were related. I think I'd just decided to put my current horse up for sale. I did not need to be buying a new horse. I was like, I think I maybe had a job offer, but I wasn't sure if I had the job yet. And I could see from the parking lot up the hill that there was something in the round pen, and I could just tell that it was a really good mover. And I was like, no, please don't make that her, because I really don't need a horse right now. But yeah, I bought her. Yeah. As soon as there's an empty stall, you're going to fill that stall. It's impossible.
Okay. So June said that I could definitely share this story with you. So after El Patrone went through his surgery and rehab, he was cleared for full work, and he was down in the barn below in basically a stall outside made out of round pen panels. And one day I was finishing up at the barn. I was at the top barn with my friend Nikki, and we just see this gorgeous chestnut come trotting up the driveway, looking so sound and so happy and so pleased with himself.
Oh gosh.
And I grabbed a bucket of grain to try to catch him. And he was like, nope, no way. I've got sweet freedom. And he went galloping up to the upper field, and June comes flying up behind him saying, he was sound, right? And I was like, oh my God, yes, he looks so good.
Oh my gosh.
But the crazy thing is that he jumped out of the round pen panels from basically a complete standstill. There was a lot of talent there for sure.
My gosh. Part of me is not surprised. That's funny.
That's okay. All right, Caitlin, what is it that makes El Patrone, or Patrick as you call him, an underdog?
When he was, I guess it was the end of his 3-year-old year, when he was at the track to be broken in and trained to race, he suffered from a condylar fracture in his left front fetlock. And now he has 3 screws in it.
I'm saying, oh, wow, like I didn't know that. But also, oh, wow, because I feel like there's a misconception or a common perception that if a horse had an injury and it's been repaired and there are screws in it, you should definitely run away from that horse and not say, hey, this is my next upper level event prospect. So did that scare you?
I was actually terrified. But our vet, Kevin Keene, and the surgeon at New Bolton, Dean Richardson, both reviewed the x-rays and they were like, this horse is good to go. There aren't any chips, there aren't any hooks in the joint. Like, it couldn't have been repaired better. And if he's been cleared for work, then you're not going to have issues in the future. Like, this isn't going to be something that causes him to go lame, that causes him to be sore after cross country. There's nothing here except some jewelry. And I was like, all right, the best in the business say that this horse could, in theory, run a 5-star on this leg, then I trust him. And
and I feel like when you're getting the thumbs up from Dean Richardson and Kevin Keene, who are just notoriously picky about horses, and Kevin Keene also competes at the upper levels, that really says so much.
Exactly.
So a quick disclaimer, nothing contained in this episode content is or should be considered or used as a substitute for veterinary medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This information in this segment is for educational and informational purposes only and is not meant as a substitute for professional advice from a veterinarian or other professional. And we highly recommend that everybody does a thorough PPE on any horse that they're considering. But once considered a career-ending injury, condylar fractures, advances in surgery and technology have made it possible for these horses to return to full potential. These injuries are most commonly found in thoroughbred racehorses, polo ponies, and eventing horses. Dr. Robert Bruzy, one of the country's leading surgeons of condylar repair, says, quote, "The condylar fracture is a disease of speed." So, generally happening under high stress situations like you would see at the racetrack, etc. When we see a condylar fracture, they fall into 2 categories. The first being an incomplete non-displaced fracture, meaning the bone fragment is still in its original position and not separated from the cannon bone. So if you're looking at the bone from the front, you would see a big segment of the bone that has fractured, but it's still in its place. The second kind of fracture is a complete and displaced fracture. It's more complicated because it means that the fragment has completely detached and is sometimes visible under the skin from under the naked eye. They can be more complicated to heal because the fragment being mobile means that the soft tissues could be infected. The surgery for a non-displaced fracture can be done under general or local anesthesia. More and more surgeons now are doing it with the horse standing and equals like a little bit of a speedier recovery. So they basically use screws to fasten the fragment down to the cannon bone, and it's tightened to the point that the bone will knit down so seamlessly that often the fracture cannot be detected in follow-up x-rays, but obviously the screws can be seen on an x-ray. The screws will remain in place, and the bone is often considered stronger than before, allowing horses to return to their former job as a racehorse or cleared for a new career with no limitations. Emily, do you have anything to say about condylar fractures?
Not as in-depth and professional as yours. However, I did have some resale horses that had condylars, and it was very much the same story, whereby as long as the surgery that's done goes well and is done by a good surgeon, I was always told that it really should not impact the horse down the road in terms of arthritis or anything like that. It's often stronger, like you were saying. So for me, as long as the rehab's done and they're sound, shouldn't be an issue.
So we did go a little slow with him for the first 2-3 months just to make sure everything was really set and healed, because it hadn't even been a full year since he'd had the surgery. But once we got going with him, he was still is such an incredible horse. Like, he's got a great work ethic, and he's actually been, knock on wood, so sound on that leg. Like, probably more sound on that leg than on his other legs. And he just kept going. I don't want to say there haven't been setbacks. He does have a nervous side, but for all intents and purposes, like, he's been relatively easy because he wants to do the job.
Was he your first off-track thoroughbred that you personally restarted, or is that something that you had done before?
Yes, he was my first. There was a racehorse breeder that I grew up down the road from, and I sat on a couple of her horses in high school. Nothing official. It was more just a high schooler wanted saddle time and was willing to sit on anything. So this is the first horse that I had, the first off the track that I had purchased and properly restarted myself.
Gotcha. And I'm imagining that Ryan helped you along the way with this. Was there anything in particular that maybe you could share about his methods, or that really stuck with you that he taught you about restarting an off-track thoroughbred?
Is really big on it all being just low pressure and letting them figure it out for themselves, so that we obviously have to tell them how to do things. We're training them, but letting them make mistakes and not making a big deal out of it. So when these things happen in the show ring, out on cross country, schooling, it doesn't need to be big and scary and traumatizing for the horses. Like, they've tripped over a little log before because they didn't know where their feet were, but it doesn't have to be that different. And he's also likes to do a little bit more often. So, like, maybe they'll jump 3 or 4 days instead of 1 or 2 like we do with the big horses, but they'll jump 4 or 5 cavalettis. It won't be a proper jump school. Just to remind them, like, hey, we can do this. It's fun, and you do know where your feet are, and it's not scary. And I just think every time I go out with Ryan and a young horse, he wants it to be such a good experience for them that they go back out the next time, and it just keeps being a good experience.
Yeah.
And that's just the way he does things, and I have seen it pay off time and time again.
So it sounds like he helps you break stuff down into small chunks, but then keeps building on it as you go to help build up that confidence.
I remember when I was thinking about doing Patrick's first novice, he was like, I know that last beginner novice went really well, but why not do one more? It's never going to hurt you to do one more and get them really confident.
Yeah. Moving along to your first season of eventing, what were your expectations once you started showing him and taking him out to events?
I was like, we're just going to go out, we're going to get experience, and we're just going to see how this goes. And I took him to his first event down in Aiken, winter of 2022. And I just did the starter with him, and he was just a good boy the whole time. I think we finished third. And then I had not intended to do a second event with him that winter. And the schedule changed, and it happened to work out that we did a beginner novice before we came back to Pennsylvania. And he ended up winning that from start to finish.
Cool.
And I was not expecting that at all. And it's not that he doesn't give me the feeling that he could win. I just was like, whatever, he's a baby horse. He's not going to go win things, and it's fine. And he doesn't need to win things. And he was like, what if I did win things? And exactly. I was like, okay, so we're for real. All right. When we came back to Pennsylvania, he did one more beginner novice. We spent the summer doing novices, and then, well, I guess not even the full summer because he moved. I'd had him for exactly a year when he did his first training. And we did that at Fair Hill, and it went really well. And we just kept kicking along. We spent a year at training and then moved him up to prelim. And he's just taken everything in stride. And I part of that is having Ryan behind me with the coaching and making sure we're really confident before we're introducing new things. But I do think a lot of that is Patrick's personality. He wants to work and he wants to do the right thing. He thrives on praise. So like it's all easy for him.
And so this was going to be, for the both of you, the first time that you had really done all of this eventing over a certain level together. Is that right?
So I had done a recognized novice and an unrecognized training. And then I had done some 3-6 equitation stuff, but not in eventing.
Can you give us some highlights over the last couple of years together, Caitlin?
All of it? No. I think doing our first prelim last fall was a real highlight for me. He was in second after dressage and only being beat by a former 5-star horse. So that was a pretty big win in my book.
I thought OTTBs couldn't do dressage.
Don't tell him that.
An imported.
It is. We did. Oh, and then why am I forgetting about this? I was going to do, I think, his second prelim at the Maryland Horse Trials at Lochmoy in the fall, and we ended up, Ryan and I took a horse to Buccalo, which was the same weekend. So I had to go to a different event, and we decided to take him to the Virginia Horse Trials and do the prelim there, which was also a 2-star, so it was tough. And it was also his first away show. So, and 20 degrees. There were a lot of things working against us that weekend, and we won that as well.
Wow.
And that was a pretty big emotional win for me. And then we did our first 2-star short at Fair Hill this spring, where we finished 4th, and then did our first 2 long at Virginia this spring. Those have all been really big for us. I think it's a lot of fun, but it definitely is more stressful having, not that we would run a horse that wouldn't chalk up after cross country, but knowing you're like under the fine tooth comb of vets and officials, you're like, oh my gosh, what if I just didn't know about this thing?
Yeah. It's always a little nerve wracking. The unknown.
Did you experience any growing pains together, or were there any things that you struggled with, and specifically like maybe in dressage or jumping into water or things like that?
He's always been really brave cross country. And when I first moved him up to training, we did actually struggle with the dressage. And I think it was a combination of both of us being a bit nervous. And we just kept going out. And I think his first 3 runs at training, we were in last after dressage. It was just purely the both of us being nervous. And we just had to keep going and get over that. I think that was biggest growing pain. And then he can be a bit horse shy in the show jump warm up, only the show jumping warm up. I'm not sure why. And I personally chicken out when he gets like that. And I'm like, who needs a warm up? We'll just go in with 3 jumps. And Ryan's, no, you're going to jump a few more and it's going to be fine. And it has started to work itself out. But that was more for me than him, I think. Was pushing through that. Nope, we're going to keep warming up. It's going to be fine.
Oh, yeah. I had a horse, and as he started to go up the levels with his former rider, he started to get really silly in the warm-up and horse shy and would like buck and kick out and try to run away from the other horses. It was really silly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why are we not all friends?
So I feel like often those show jump warm-ups are like half the size that they probably should be with twice the number of horses in them, but it's nobody's fault. There's probably not much else you can do, but definitely can be a bit chaotic. At what point did you realize that he really had all the pieces to be an upper level horse for you?
I think it was, we did the training at Pine Top last year. Yeah. And Pine Top was like, it's one of those events that you look at and you're like, okay, all the big time riders do this. It's got to be a good one. And so it's like a bucket list item. And he just rocked around that. He was like, this is easy. I'm just going to gallop and I'm going to jump the things. And then we're going to go home. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then I talked to her and I was like, okay, what if we did a modified? Like, definitely not ready for a prelim yet, but what if we looked at a modified and we did that? And he was like, just hopping over things. And I was like, okay, I guess he's actually like could be a big time horse.
Oh, and Pine Top is like the Olympics of every division.
If only you had known all these years that he jumped from a standstill out of over a 5-foot gate.
No wonder. This is a piece of cake.
So where do you think that you could see your partnership going? Your wildest
wildest dreams, he and I are going to do all of the 5 stars.
Nice.
Obviously, you only know so much about if a horse is going to handle that kind of pressure, and once you're doing it, you can only hope. But he does have the athleticism, like the prelims and the 2 stars, he's just been like hopping over, and he's quick on his feet if I ride him poorly and get him somewhere that I shouldn't have. That's okay. I got this. And Ryan seems to think that he's got what it takes, and I trust Ryan's judgment on this.
And El Patrone is also on the developing horse list. He, I think, is in 11th place for 7-year-olds across the country. And I think what they've done with this list is just created a ranking of 7-year-olds across the country that have outstanding event records, and they're keeping a close eye on them. I think it's really cool that he's on that list.
Yeah, something like that. I think it was 11th, which I didn't even know was a thing. Gabby Dickerson actually posted, because she's got 2 horses in the top 10, and I was like, wait, that's my horse's name. I didn't even know the list was a thing. And I just happened to see it on someone else's social media. And I was like, wait, that's really cool.
Oh.
And you just recently started the El Patrone fan club. Can you tell us what that's all about?
So I've had a few people asking, like, what is owning an event horse, for a rider, and how they can get involved. And I was talking to Ryan, and we were like, maybe this is something we can work out for El Patrone too. And so I guess I'm doing it as a monthly fee, but it could be a bulk or whatever. I'm trying not to make any hard and fast decisions about what it needs to be, just because it's mine. It can be whatever I need it to be. And yeah, exactly. Yes. And it'll just help offset his costs a little bit and make it possible to get out and do more things and compete more and really get a backing for him and I both. And in return, I'm thinking people can have access to him and I. They can come meet him, meet Ryan, meet everybody at the barn if they want, can come to lessons, come to shows. And then when we go to bigger shows and you need, say, an owner's pass to get into the barns, or if there's events for owners, I can put their names down and get the wristbands or tickets or whatever it is, and weekly updates and things like that without commitment of buying a horse for someone. There's always a risk when you own a horse, and if you own a horse for someone and it gets hurt, you got to figure out what to do with it. And it takes that aspect out of it. If the worst happened and he couldn't compete, they wouldn't be obligated to keep paying bills on him, you know? So hoping it could be the best of both worlds for me and people who were like wanting to get into that side of things.
It sounds like a great opportunity for people like to be involved, get a lot of updates from you guys, and maybe get a little taste of event horse ownership without that big commitment or pressure or anything like that. Nice.
And if people want to get involved in the fan club, Caitlin, how can they go about doing that?
They can reach out to me on any social media, on my personal page, or I've got my horse page is CMR Eventing. And so that's a great place to reach out to me, or could send me an email. That's cmreventing@gmail.com.
All right. So it sounds like a great opportunity. And we wanted to wrap up a little bit and get to know El Patrone, or Patrick, as you call him, a little bit better. So we have some fun questions for you. Does he have any nicknames other than Patrick?
Sometimes when he's being sassy, I call him Patrice, but officially, no, he does not have any nicknames other than Patrick.
You're very disciplined. My dogs have 100 nicknames. So, and what is his favorite treat to eat?
He loves the Mrs. Pasture's cookies.
It's a lot of fans.
He is very spoiled.
And what's his most annoying or funniest habit?
I don't know that he has any annoying habits. Maybe not annoying, but he is a big time napper. Every morning he comes in, he eats his breakfast, and then he takes a nap. He lays down. And if we're having a slow day at the barn, I'll go in his stall, and if I sit down behind his head, he'll lay flat out with his neck or his head in my lap, and he'll lay there for as long as I let him.
I'm going to chalk that up to him being born and raised at Castle Rock, because June always encourages everybody to go in and play with the babies when they're really small. And we have a couple this year that will just lay down with you and put their head in your lap. And it's just about the cutest thing ever.
Oh, that's so cute. I feel honored every time he lets me just go in and lay down with him. I'm like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Every single time.
I think every time you get to experience that with a horse, it's like the little girl inside you just goes crazy.
It does.
All right, Eve, you want to ask a couple questions?
If you could ride any event horse, who is it?
Tough question.
Oh, that's a good question. I always really loved Allison Springer's Arthur. I've always thought that was a really cool horse. I might have to go with that one.
It's a good one.
Oh, I love Arthur too. That's a really good one. What's your dream event to compete in worldwide?
I think I'd have to say Kentucky. I know it could be anything in the world, and I've heard Blair Castle's a really good one. Obviously, everybody loves Burley and badminton. But I think it also goes back to the kid who loved horses because, you know, when we're little, that's the big event you hear about.
Yeah.
And it is just beautiful.
What's your favorite cross-country hype song?
I do have a playlist, actually. But I think my top song is Come On by Kesha.
Do you have any superstitions or rituals that you do before big events or before cross-country? Anything you have to do?
I do have lucky socks, which I have been told it's a thing to not wash your lucky socks, and that's not the case at all.
Oh, boy.
Even a little bit. But I do have a pair of lucky socks that I have to wear for cross country. And I have a necklace that's got a part of my first horse's tail in it. And that I cannot go cross country without it. Even if it's zipped in a pocket instead of around my neck, I have to have it.
It's really sweet. Now you can go. You wrote this one.
Do you have, or what's your favorite Ryanism? Any quirky, funny thing that he does?
I don't know. I think it's not a thing he says, but if you look in like most pictures, Ryan has got a thumbs up. Like awards
That's
photos,
funny. I don't know
or like
why
you'll
that's
see him
funny,
off in the distance, make eye contact with him, he'll give you a thumbs up.
Oh, if Patrick was a human celebrity or a character in a TV show, who would he be?
I think I'm going to have to go with Andy Dwyer from Parks and Recreation.
And then what's one word you would use to describe Patrick?
Goofy.
Yes, we've got one final question for you. What is one word that you would use to describe OTTBs, or off-track thoroughbreds?
I don't know if this is quite the right word, but I think I'd go with passionate.
I like that. I don't think I've heard that one before.
Like everyone I've met is just so full of heart.
Yeah.
Whether it be like their personality or their desire to work. And they've all just got such huge personalities.
And then I know I said that was the last question, but there's actually one more question.
Okay.
What would you say to other riders looking for a horse with a previous injury, like a healed condylar fracture? Do you have any advice for them?
I definitely listen to your vets. They're the professionals, but I think a lot of times it's worth the chance. Especially being so involved with the upper level side of the industry. None of these horses x-ray perfect or vet perfect. And most of them go on to have very full careers. I think it's worth the risk, honestly.
It's so funny because I think, like we mentioned before, there's so many people that put these in search of ads out there, and it's always can't have any past problems whatsoever.
Right.
But like what you said, if you walked into any barn with upper level horses and start x-raying things or ultrasounding things, like you're going to find stuff. It just needs, you need to know it's there and you need to know how to maintain it.
Exactly. And that's all it really is.
Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us. We're both such big fans of your journey with Patrick, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for you both. What's coming up next for you guys?
Plantation.
Coming up.
That is, I want to say it's like the 19th through the 20-something of September.
Oh, yeah, a big plantation.
Yes, the International. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Yeah, this was super fun.
I know June's going to be really excited to hear this episode because she just loves hearing updates about all of the former Castle Rock horses.
I try to send her updates. Life gets a hold of me sometimes. But
if you liked what you heard today, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow OTTB on Tap on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and contact us with Interview candidates and topic suggestions at OTTBOnTap.com. We love hearing from you. Bye.